Hello everyone. So today in this video, I am offering you a method for creating a stock of food with a very quick setup and at a lower cost. I think many have understood that here in Europe, we have entered a somewhat unstable environment, especially in terms of energy policy. You have many observers, many players who believe that you have a conjunction of factors. That means this winter, we could really find ourselves at the gates of hell. So energy shortages, particularly in Europe, are now likely. Therefore, there is a high chance of ending up with a systemic shock and a disruption of supply chains for the whole world this winter. We have already all noted a discontinuity in the supply of certain goods, and in the coming months, this could manifest itself in clear breaks that will hit our daily lives. In addition, you have problems related to the price of gas that weigh on the production of nitrogen fertilizers and could lead to massive and widespread food shortages. So the time has come to look together at how to establish a medium long-term food stock for subsistence. So we're going to see that there's a lot to say. It's going to be quite dense, but we'll also see that after this video, those who are not yet prepared will be able to do so very quickly and very economically. The information I'm going to give you in this video comes from maritime training provided by military doctors. This is a chapter that lays the foundation for a balanced survival stock for the maritime environment, namely in a confined and hostile universe. So I'm going to synthesize the training by adapting it and giving a concrete practical example for 100 days. So beforehand, we're going to define a little bit what I will present to you because there should not be any confusion. So today, I'm not going to present to you what you should have in your cupboards. That is a few days or a few weeks of living with the usual rotation of canned goods, etc. These topics have been presented thousands of times. That would be of no interest here. On the other hand, of course, it doesn't stop you from having a dynamic stock that will always be useful to you. So the topic here is to build a real emergency stock, a crisis stock, that you can keep in the medium and long term. For example, you can forget about it for 3 or 4 years without touching it, and that's the whole point. So it's a stock that can be quickly built up by those who can't set up a more technical stock that requires a lot of thought, time, space, money, and maintenance. So here, I am mainly thinking about people who have small apartments in the city. However, the different types of stocks are complementary. Keep that in mind. So we keep a pragmatic approach. This is just the type of stock that I'm presenting today. It's a stock that will somehow take care of the most urgent things. Here are a few benchmarks to provide. It's worth knowing that in all conflict areas or places where there have been natural disasters that have been able to stop supplies, there are 2 immutable phenomena that will take place. The first phenomenon, under degraded conditions, we always find clans of a few individuals forming. Often clans that are formed around a family cell with external elements that can aggregate there and which will operate in pillage mode, so to speak. Conversely, there are small families or isolated individuals. So this structure, it forms naturally and very quickly. Well, it's not the subject of the video, but know that in this context of rupture food shortages, people have much less normal, much less controlled behaviors. In 2 or 3 days, you go from what we call civilization to barbarism. So now you will have to be very aware of your environment, your neighborhood in particular, because this is typically when you will observe behavior changes. Of course, you have all these examples of situations where part of the population serves another part of the population that is distressed. So these examples, they exist, but they only exist when the people who are going to help, firstly, are not affected by the problem or are very little affected by the problem, and secondly, are certain that they will not be in the near future. We often observe mutual aid when disasters are occasional and affect a limited geographical area, but not on the scale of a country, for example. So this is a mistake that is often made, but make no mistake, when everything goes wrong, you rather have a Nutella effect that sets in. So the second phenomenon to take into account now is that when you have sharp supply cuts, we generally notice a calming down after about a month. So it's very relative. Sometimes it can be more, sometimes it can be less. Simply because when you have base stocks that are exhausted, there is a drop in the general public's vigor, as well as a reduced ability for this population to move around effectively. So all this is based on historical observations, and it remains theoretical, of course. But after a certain time, most individuals are no longer able to commit abuses. So we have a return to relative calm after about a month. So the most acute phase of a crisis can be violent, but it will always be short by definition. Clearly, these are generalizations. That gives you a general picture of the situations we may have to face. So it's roughly, let's say, average, what we're going to find on the ground. Depending on the location, it can be significantly worse or pleasantly surprising. In any case, this is what it is reasonable to prepare for. This sequence that will follow a supply break, when it occurs, it will be between 3 days after the stark break, and it will continue for a month. So it's going to be a really critical period, and it's that particular moment that we will need to be able to manage. So you have to be aware. In the current context, it may be that the state cannot perfectly manage the situation throughout the entire territory, at least initially. So the topic of this video is to prepare for that period. Don't forget that the worst is never certain, but preparing is wise. So, you're starting to understand that I'm not going to talk to you about chocolate spread. Keep in mind that when we're hungry, we eat anything and at any price while waiting for normal conditions to return. That's why today I'm going to focus on a sufficiently balanced basic stock for a transitional period and, most importantly, accessible to everyone. So, one does not prevent the other, obviously. Enhance it once again if you have the means. But don't lose sight of the fact that the primary function of a food stockpile is to cover an individual's needs in order to keep them in good health. And that's all. So for those who are afraid of getting depressed in such a context, which I can absolutely understand, I advise you to work on your mindset in advance. Again, this isn't the subject of the video, but know that there are many options on that side for you. So another thing, what I'm not going to cover today in this video is drinking water, which is a whole separate subject with filtration methods, reserves, etc. I won't talk about rations like the Energy 5 or the 7 Oceans or combat rations or the Army's rations. I also won't talk about household consumables, medications, or the first aid kit. I won't talk about maintenance hygiene products. I also won't cover the safety of your stock, so I won't talk about the pet food supply either. I do not deal with energy and electricity, wood, gases, gasoline, etc. Know that. Nevertheless, for cooking food, a simple little stock of tea-light candles or solid alcohol can be very useful, especially for those who don't have access to anything else. Plus, it's very cheap. So these topics would be too long to discuss here, as you've understood, so I advise you to anticipate all that for now as much as possible. So let's now get to the heart of the topic of this video, namely what the stock should be in the context that we have defined. So we have constraints, rapid establishment of stock at the lowest possible cost, 3-month autonomy. So we will deliberately take a large scope balance of diet with a search for calories and with sufficient nutritional intake, and finally the longest possible shelf life without any particular container, technique, nor vacuum machine or anything like that. So we're going to start with the cereals. Therefore, we will find 5 kilograms of pasta. Careful to what has the least egg traces possible. No eggs for preservation. We have 5 kilograms of basic, inexpensive white rice. You have 3 kilograms of oat flakes. So the interesting thing with oat flakes is that they can be prepared with cold water. And you have 4 kilograms of semolina too. which can also be prepared with cold water. Now the vegetables, you have 2 kilograms of blonde lentils, you have 2 kilograms of red beans, the red beans being the most nutritious of all the beans. You have 2 kilograms of chickpeas and 2 kg of split peas. So always for 100 days. So here you have more than enough to cover the needs for one person for 3 months. Cereals provide carbohydrates for energy, and also vitamins, magnesium, iron, proteins, and more. The legumes, they are rich in carbohydrates, in fibers, and proteins as well. They are very good for the brain and muscles. So regarding the legumes, they require a lot of energy to prepare. So they need to be cooked for a long time. Know that if you simply soak them for 12 hours or 24 hours, you will divide the cooking time by 2 or 3. So it can be interesting in terms of energy savings because we may also have constraints in that area. So if you want, you can opt for home canning or preservation in brine, for example, after cooking. This will allow you to have ready-to-eat foods in a timely manner, but you will have a theoretical shelf life significantly reduced compared to raw legumes. You can also sprout legumes like beans, lentils, or even grains like wheat for a few days. This will boost them and provide an additional 20% in proteins and other trace elements if eaten at the beginning of germination. So what we call Chinese noodles are often low-end food, products without nutritional value, and moreover, they usually have poor shelf life. The important principle of this stock is that between legumes and cereals, the sources of plant proteins will balance each other out. So it's a combination that becomes an alternative to animal-based foods. By consuming cereals and legumes simultaneously in 2/3 to 1/3 proportions, you will have a good absorption of proteins, which can allow you to hold off without eating meat or fish, and this without losing strength and without muscle wasting. So we do still have cans of fish, but if we had a problem with the preservation of the cans, for example, the cereals and legumes set could undoubtedly make up for this shortage for a while. So, this will allow us to significantly reduce the intake of animal-based foods, which are expensive and do not keep as long. For cereals and legumes, you can keep them for 30 years without a problem when they're well preserved. Flour doesn't keep quite as well, not as long, but we could have also incorporated it into the stock. For cereals and legumes, I advise you to freeze them for 48 hours before storing them. This is a technique that allows us to eliminate insects that may be present in the products or on the packages. So this can also work with fresh bay leaves that you will put in your containers, which are particularly useful for keeping away food mites. So everything we're going to see should be kept cool. In a healthy cellar or pantry, that's very good, away from light and dry. The more we store in this kind of environment, the better the preservation will be. So also be aware that in a tropical area, food preservation is very difficult and sometimes even impossible for certain foods without a complex system. So for oils now, you have to know that 2 to 3 tablespoons per day are necessary to meet our essential fatty acid needs. So here you have 4 liters of oil for 3 months, for 100 days in this case. So you have 2 liters of olive oil and 2 liters of rapeseed oil at the best price as always. So both types of oils have good nutritional qualities. These quantities will cover the dressing and cooking for 100 days. For the expiration dates, then do not confuse the date limite de consommation, which will give you the date after which the health aspect of the product will no longer be guaranteed, namely that the manufacturer indicates to you that the product will be dangerous afterwards. This date and the date of minimum durability, which will tell you that the taste qualities of the product are no longer guaranteed after the date. This time, it will only be a question of the quality of the product for oils. They have a date of minimum durability, so consider that after 2 or 3 years of good preservation, they may go rancid, especially if they are not of good quality, but they will never be dangerous. So you have precautions to take with all the products is that there is never any mold on the product you consume, because there can be mold truly toxic. If you want, you can use coconut oil on sweetbreast of good quality, which are 2 products less good overall for health, but which keep at least 5 years without problem. So you also products like canned butter or powdered butter, which is preserved for a very long time, but which are very expensive, difficult to find in France in our regions. So you could possibly make your own canned butter for enthusiasts. You have here 500 grams of salt, basic sea salt, and you have 90 grams of pepper. The pepper is in grains for better preservation. These 2 foods have a lifetime preservation. Salt is essential to life. It's quite difficult to find it in nature when you're not on the coast. So you can find salt in its natural state in certain regions like rock salt, but that's not always the case, and the only exploitable source other than sea salt is the blood of animals, which contains a lot of it. So it's interesting to stockpile salt, and there are a few possible secondary uses for this salt. So for spices and aromatic plants, I would advise you to locate them around your home, particularly in rural areas. Of course, in a way to know where you will find mint, rosemary, thyme, bay leaf, wild onion, etc. Take advantage of this to search and locate sources and fountains, which of course will be vital in this context. If you have aromatic herbs at your disposal, know that it will be quite easy to make the equivalent of a bouillon cube with oil and spices. Commercial bouillon cubes are convenient, but generally not very good for health. They don't bring much in terms of nutrition, so it's not necessary to include them in the stock. So when it comes to soy sauce or ox meat, good quality products are not bad for health if you don't abuse them. You can take them if you are a little more fortunate that you are a connoisseur, but it's not essential for wine vinegar. So it's good for seasoning and cleaning. So there it is at 6%. At 6%, it already attacks some bacteria and salmonella. It's a degreaser, very long conservation, cold in opaque bottles, the sugar now. So there you have a kilo. So the sugar will allow to improve small breakfasts with oat flakes, semolina in particular, but also to pass the herbal teas. So we notice historically that salt and sugar are among the most sought-after commodities in times of scarcity. So sugar, we can't say that it's a good food for health, but it will provide energy quickly if you have a drop in oil levels. So sugar will also be used to store energy and synthesize proteins. So it's primarily a good flavor enhancer if you can obviously choose a superior quality cane sugar, it will be better. And for the preservation of sugar, it's for a lifetime. So note that it is possible to make sugar with birch sap, but it is very long and very energy consuming. So in principle, we heat the birch sap with wood to obtain a liquid sugar. So we can also make homemade sugar with beet in our regions quite easily. No honey in this stock because to make a difference with sugar, a high quality honey is needed. Good honey is very expensive and rare. The alternative is to produce it yourself, of course. Honey is composed of 80% sugar and 19% water. Honey is chemically unstable, particularly when temperatures increase slightly. So the benefits of honey will have difficulty being preserved over time. Ultimately, after a certain amount of time, you will end up with honey that has the quality of a basic sugar. So sure, there are always enthusiasts, but let's just say it's a choice. As for the medicinal properties of honey, which are real, such as it being antibacterial, healing burns, etc., you will get about the same type of benefit with green clay, and even more so. So I advise you to also locate an area where you can find green clay. You should be able to recover it for free quite easily in order to keep it. So for the powdered skim milk, here you have 600 grams. So the powdered milk will be interesting for making all kinds of preparations and for diversifying the intake, especially for breakfast. It mainly contains carbohydrates, proteins, but you also have vitamins and minerals. Even when well preserved after 2 or 3 years, we often see color changes, it yellows, and it's chemically quite unstable. As long as it's not spoiled, it's edible. It's definitely the most sensitive product of this entire stock. For coffee or tea, it's not essential. You can very easily make infusions or use oak acorns or even the fruit of cleavers, which are called achines, which is very common for making a good coffee substitute. Now, for the canned goods, for the sardines, mackerels, and tuna, sardines and mackerels are very high in omega-3, calcium, vitamin D, B12, phosphorus, proteins, etc. So these are really interesting nutrients, which will advantageously complete the stock, but at this price, you won't have it every day. For tinned goods, now you have a best before date, which is given by the manufacturer. But I won't be telling you anything new, I think, by saying that these are imposed standards, which are far below the actual expiration date. You often have examples of canned sardines in particular that go through the decades with no problem. So if you're forced to keep canned goods for a long time, only eat them if the cans aren't damaged, aren't bulging, and there's no unpleasant smell. Upon opening, of course, obviously. Those who can, or those who have the time, can make their own preservation, dried meat, lacto-fermentation, vacuum sealing, dehydration, preservation in oil, etc. Everything is good. That's it. We've covered the basic stock that is valid for one person for 100 days, and which will cost you about 100 euros. You have the exact description with quantities, prices in the description. As for the micronutrients contained in fresh foods, although they do not provide much energy, they are essential to your health. So these are the vitamins, minerals, and trace elements. Even though there's a lot in this stock, you'll need to get them from the outside as much as possible with foraging, hunting, fishing, which can significantly improve the balance of this dietary base. So don't hesitate to also get some sunlight, which allows for the synthesis of vitamin D and better health. So even more reason to go outside when it's possible. For foraging, if possible, you should concentrate on common and easy to identify plants like nettles, dandelion, dead nettle, tigo leaves, and fruits and berries you know. Know that with a stock like this, you can last 3 months without a problem while waiting for your environment to improve, and you'll be much better prepared than most of our fellow citizens for a transitional period. So make good use of it. Don't wait until the last moment to prepare, and I'll see you soon for a new video.